Let me ask you all a question. What do you think would happen if in the final episode of the 3rd season, instead of the BPD arresting Avon Barksdale and his entire crew, Avon actually responded to Slim Charles's call, and he, along with everybody who was originally arrested, raided Vincent's rim shop and executed Marlo Stanfield and Chris Partlow? How would the rest of the Wire's story play out? Well, I have spent the last 24 hours mapping out my alternative ending and all that happens in between, as well as attempting to answer the question of, what if Avon Barksdale beat Marlo Stanfield?
Yo, B. Sham saying and Charles saying they still up at the rim shop. Marlo, his boy Chris, and Vincent, they still eating. But the rest of the muscle, they rolled out.
We kick off near the beginning of arguably the Wire's greatest episode, Middle Ground. And Avon is currently berating Stringer Bell on how brain dead of an idea it would be to whack a state senator, and that he can't be dealing with legitimate businessmen like he would a gangster in the street. However, this time, instead of Stringer refusing to acknowledge that Avon is in fact correct in his assessment, he actually takes his partner's advice on board, and instead of snitching to Bunny Colvin, in an attempt to both keep what he's got going on with Proposition Joe, and because he believes that the streets can be run as though it was some legitimate business, he chooses to stand by Avon Barksdale and his war against Marlo. Brother Muzone still visits Avon in the barbershop that very same night, and he gives him an ultimatum: either give up your partner in Stringer Bell, or accept that the Barksdale dynasty is no longer, as without New York, Avon is done. After some hard thought, Avon makes the very same decision he does on the show, that being to give up Stringer Bell to Brother Muzone and Omar Little. Avon and Stringer still share their final moment overlooking Baltimore. However, this time Stringer opens up to Avon and apologises for mixing business with the street, and he tells Avon that he's going to stand with him in his war against Marlo. Avon's heart breaks just that much more, and the very next day Stringer Bell is killed. The following night, Sapper informs Avon that Slim Charles has a location on Marlo Stanfield and Chris Partlow. All the Stanfield muscle has rolled out, and now is the perfect time to win this war. Marlo, followed by Chris and Vincent, exit the rim shop, and as they do, they find themselves surrounded by a horde of blacked out SUVs. Chris and Marlo share a disappointed glance. They know what's about to come. The Barksdale crew come pouring out the vehicles, shouting and pointing their weapons at the two. Avon Barksdale surprisingly, however, gives Marlo some credit, as he tells him that he actually respects the little motherfucker for showing heart. However, the game is the game, and Avon executes both Marlo Stanfield and Chris Partlow. The following morning, Avon Barksdale, accompanied by Slim Charles, finds himself overlooking the bullet-ridden corpse of Stringer Bell. After some pondering, Avon mutters the same 3 words he muttered to himself in the barbershop when pondering the cause of Stringer Bell's downfall.
Proposition Joe back.
Slim Charles then asks Avon if he's ready for the meet. We cut to Butch's bar, where a skeptical Avon approaches Proposition Joe, who's seemingly been waiting for him. Joe starts by apologising to Avon regarding what happened to Stringer. He also apologises for selling on Barksdale territory, and explains that he was under the impression that Avon was on board with it, and that he would have never sold in the towers if he knew that Stringer was acting alone and without Avon's backing. He also tells Avon what he told Omar in Season 4, that he was unaware of Stringer's plan to take out Brother Muzone, and that he was simply used as a middleman to set up a parlay between he and Omar. In an effort to make amends, Joe finally offers Avon in on his product, to which Avon replies by asking Joe what's changed. You threatened to cut us out so long as I carried on the war with Marlo, and carried on the war I did. Joe tells Avon that it was simply what was best for business at the time. However, now with Marlo gone, it would be stupid for us like-minded individuals to not all come together as one big Baltimore team. Avon's still skeptical of Joe and most definitely hiding something up his sleeve, accepts the offer same as he did in Season 2.
Yeah, you need to go to Prop Joe. I ain't gonna argue with you.
A few days later, Omar Little can be seen with Ronaldo scoping one of Barksdale's stash houses. He and Ronaldo break in and do what they do. However, before fleeing, Omar makes a snide comment to one of the Barksdale soldiers about being the one who dropped Avon's boy, and he demands that the soldier get the word out. Slim Charles later reports back to Avon, and he tells him that Omar Little is not only still robbing their supply, but he's also bragging about being the one who murdered Stringer Bell. The news infuriates Avon, and he demands that the bounty on Omar's head be doubled. Slim, although in disagreement, chooses to stay silent, seeing as though he already tried to advise Avon on not going after Omar in Season 3. However, Avon didn't want to hear any of it then, and he most likely won't want to hear any of it now. Proposition Joe eventually gets word that the Barksdales are tearing the city upside down on their hunt for Omar Little, and such enrages Joe, as once more Avon Barksdale is out dropping bodies and making life damn near impossible for the co-op. However, he soon sees such as an opportunity to get rid of somebody whose intentions towards him he doesn't quite yet know. Joe gets word to Omar, and he and Mr. Little meet at Butchie's bar. And Joe starts out by apologising to Omar regarding the whole situation with Brother Mouzone. And he explains like he did to Avon that he was simply used by Stringer as a middleman, and that he had no idea of Stringer's true intention. And so to make amends, he offers Omar the location of the co-op's next big resupply. However, Butchie, having been present for both Joe's meeting with Avon, and now this meeting with Omar, asks Joe why he wants Omar to not only rob his own supply, but also the supply of the man he's just invited into the co-op. To which Joe replies that Avon Barksdale have broken the terms of their agreement, and seeing as though the Barksdales are responsible for security on the next resupply, Joe wants Omar to use Avon's second in command to get a line on Avon and take him out. Omar and Ronaldo, accompanied by two of Ronaldo's people as well as Kimmy, await Proposition Joe's call. A little after the call comes through, the Barksdale muscle as well as the Greek muscle present for the resupply find themselves boxed in by Omar and his crew. And here is where they find Slim, who slowly lowers his gun and drops to his knees as approached by Omar. Ronaldo and his crew grab what they can, and whilst they're doing so, Omar whispers a little something into Slim's ear. He tells Slim that Stringer Bell, the second in command before he, was killed because Avon gave him up to Omar and Mouzone, and that they didn't even need to torture Avon for the information. Slim is puzzled, however he says nothing. Omar then leaves Slim with a choice: either give up Avon Barksdale, or spend the rest of your life being hunted by me. After a moment of confusion wipes over Slim, he tells Omar that he'll get word to him via Butchie. Omar chuckles as he and his crew flee the scene. The following night, Omar Little meets up with Slim Charles in a desolate area. Slim hands Omar a phone and tells him the location of Avon's apartment. He also tells Omar that he'll call him once he knows Avon is alone. Omar, not quite satisfied however, asks Slim why he's given his boss up. Is he just that afraid of Omar, or is it something more? To which Slim replies with his own question. He asks Omar if he remembers the time he and his granny got shut up on a Sunday morning. And Slim explains to Omar that he was furious when he learned that Avon had given the order, and that if he were the one who got the call, he would have
known better than that bullshit.
Omar seemingly takes Slim at his word, and as Slim rolls out, Omar nods towards a taxi park just up the road. The taxi follows Slim. Omar and Ronaldo sit in the very same taxi. They're parked just down the road from Avon's apartment. Ronaldo had tracked Slim here from the other night. The two discuss how unusually quiet it's been, and that they haven't seen many Barksdale soldiers entering or exiting the building. Omar eventually spots Slim Charles leaving the building, and soon after his phone rings. It's Slim giving them the green light. Omar and Ronaldo charge up the stairs and smash down the doors of Avon's apartment. It's dark, empty, and just as they realise what's happened, Avon's soldiers come pouring through the door. They've been played. The two retreat back to the balcony, returning fire as they take cover behind whatever they can. However, there's just too many. Ronaldo eventually gets taken out with Omar soon to follow. Omar being Omar, however, somehow manages to find a way, and he suicides it off the balcony exactly like he does in the show.
What the?
Proposition Joe eventually gets word from his nephew regarding what went down at Avon's apartment. A chill is sent down Joe's spine, as if Avon has found out that Joe was in any way involved with this attempted hit, he's most certainly a dead man. Omar still being alive doesn't help. Joe is called to a meeting with the co-op similar to the one that took place at the end of Season 4. And during the meeting he acts as though he's interested in finding out about how Mr. Little could have possibly managed to discover the whereabouts of the co-op's resupply. However, his true goal here is to try and decipher whether or not Avon knows of Joe's involvement with Omar. After the meeting, a skeptical Avon approaches Joe and outright asks to be put in contact with the Greek connection, and assures Joe that all he wants is to himself be assured that this wasn't an inside job. Reluctant, Joe agrees to set up a meet between Avon and Vondas. Now in this version of events, we don't just have Joe acknowledge the possibility of Avon wanting to cut him out of the Greek connection, but we actually have Joe do something about it. And after Avon meets with Vondas and is assured that Joe was in no way involved with the robbery, Joe orders Cheese to follow Avon, as he wants to know if his suspicions become true, and if they are, then he's able to act accordingly. A few days later, Avon, accompanied by Slim Charles, arrives at the Greeks' cafe on the dock. Slim tells Avon that the Greeks are willing to hear him out but to not expect anything. Avon tells Vondas that he's suspicious of Prop Joe having something to do with the robbery, and that they too should be suspicious also. Vondas says nothing. Avon thanks the man for his time and he and Slim exit the cafe, leaving Vondas and the Greek to ponder. Outside, Slim asks Avon if he really thinks Joe had anything to do with all that went down, to which Avon replies by telling Slim that it doesn't matter whether or not he did or didn't. With Joe in control of the connection, the West Side are under his thumb, and soon they might find themselves unable to ever get out from under, similar to Stringer Bell. Cheese calls Joe and informs him that he's just seen Avon leaving the Greeks' cafe. He asks Joe what are they going to do, to which Joe replies that there's not much they can do. If the Greeks already suspect we had something to do with the robbery, us trying to convince them otherwise would only make them suspect us even more. Joe immediately begins to pack his bags and plans to leave Baltimore, similar to how he did on the show. However, before he leaves, he decides to do the one thing Stringer Bell was never willing to do. He snitches to Jimmy McNulty, who Joe had managed to track down from the time he and Bunk picked up Cheese and attempted to flip him. He tells McNulty the location of Avon's warehouse, which he was able to attain via Cheese, who had been tailing Avon since their last meet. He also tells McNulty that Avon was the one who dropped Marlo Stanfield and Chris Partlow. McNulty asks Joe why he's snitching on Avon, and Joe replies by saying that he's fed up with trying to run this shit like it's a business, and that he isn't going to make the same mistakes Stringer Bell made. As the two pull away from the scene, we're revealed to a black SUV that has seemingly been watching the two from afar. McNulty, dressed in his patrol uniform, meets up with Lester Freeman and Bunk Moreland. He hands her to a piece of paper and jokingly tells them that the Major Crimes Unit isn't squat without McNulty. That very same night, the MCU raid Avon's warehouse, and they not only find dozens of illegal weaponry, but also the weapon used to kill Chris Partlow and Marlo Stanfield. Avon Barksdale is arrested.
Read it slow. In between them 2 days, give you something to think on.
Carrying his bags and ready to leave Baltimore, Proposition Joe is escorted out the house and to the car by his nephew. We catch a glimpse of that same black SUV from before parked across the street, and inside that SUV is Slim, who's seemingly been following Joe same as Cheese has been following Avon. As Joe drives away, Slim surprisingly does nothing. He doesn't attempt to call Avon, he for whatever reason just lets Joe make his departure. A couple days later, same as in the show, Slim Charles, accompanied by Fatface Rick, sit across from Vondas in the cafe. Avon Barksdale is sitting in a courtroom alongside the majority of his crew. Oh, and by the way, Omar Little was killed by Kennard a few days prior.